When a spouse refuses to cooperate during a divorce, the process can become incredibly challenging. Associate lawyer Julia Fogarty with Shulman & Partners is here with more on how they can help. Why might an ex refuse to cooperate during a divorce?
Well, thank you for having me. Sometimes someone doesn't want the divorce. They are set in their ways. They're happy in perhaps the unhappiness of their situation, and they're not quite ready to move on.
Getting out of the routine, I guess, can be quite difficult and challenging.
It can be. Also, there's a lot of financial challenges involved with a divorce. So it's difficult to navigate, especially if you're doing it without counsel.
So how can you navigate the process with one member of the family that doesn't want the divorce?
Well, one of the nice things about Ontario is you don't necessarily need the other party to agree to be able to proceed with a divorce. There's a cool down period, so you have to wait about a year, but after that you're able to file an application and proceed with a divorce without their participation. So what we like to do is we'll set up strict timelines, we attempt to negotiate. If the other party isn't willing to negotiate, we're not going to throw someone's money away and attempt to continue and continue and continue at something that's not going to work.
What is an uncontested versus a contested divorce?
So an uncontested divorce is one where you file the divorce and the other party doesn't respond. At that point, you'll proceed to, say, an uncontested trial. You'll have a discussion with the judge, or the judge may decide based on your written materials, and then you may be granted a divorce. A contested divorce is where one party says, I'm going to be prejudiced if we divorce. There are things like limitation periods, specifically for equalization, that come into play when you get a divorce. So equalization has two different limitation periods here in Ontario. One is 6 years from the date of separation. The other is 2 years from the date of a divorce. So it's a much shorter clock. Now, equalization is where you level out the equity that you brought in from the start of the marriage to the end of the marriage. And that's kind of how we deal with fairness here in Ontario.
All that sounds extremely confusing, which I guess that's why it's important to get a legal professional.
It can be. It can be. We do a lot of math. People always joke, we go into the legal field so we don't have to do math. And then we end up doing math anyway. That's just kind of how it goes.
Now, in your expertise, though, what percentage of divorces go smoothly where both parties are eager to get this resolved?
I mean, it's difficult to say. There's a lot of hurt feelings when you're getting a divorce, and it becomes especially complicated where, say, maybe one spouse has more assets than the other, or there's children. And I think it's really important that we always focus in and we put the children first, because they may not be active participants in the litigation, but the litigation is, about them in a large part. They have to live with the consequences of the breakdown of the relationship. And I think sometimes people forget that.
Yeah, my parents got divorced as well when I was in college. Luckily, I was old enough to understand a little bit more. But I guess if you're younger, you have to go to your dad's on the weekend, and your parents are always fighting. That must be a challenge for families to navigate as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't de-escalate a situation, that's a conflict that continues all the way up through university sometimes. A child remains a child of the marriage until they're completed sometimes their first or even their second university degree, depending on the education of their parents. So that's, a lifetime commitment, even when you're outside of the marriage, because for 18, 21, 25 years, you might have to interact with this person. If your children get married, you're both going to be at the ceremony, and people forget that.
Quickly, what are the risks of not seeking legal counsel in a divorce?
Well, you might agree to something that's not favorable to you, that maybe not in line with the law. So perhaps you might give up more than you maybe should have. You might agree to something thinking based on antiquated notions that it's not a 50-50 default when you go into a divorce. One of the benefits to having counsel, though, is that you can negotiate these things outside of court. A lot of times we'll negotiate things like a separation agreement, and there's more privacy to that. When you go into court, you have a level of public scrutiny.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Lots of more live coming your way.
Thanks for having me.